Hey there, welcome back to another review. This time, it's a review of another horror anthology. And another horror anthology from across the pond, from Britain, the Amicus horror anthology, The House That Dripped Blood. And yeah, I like this cover, but I hate this fucking Walmart shit. Exclusive Walmart DVD 2-pack, bonus film, The House That Dripped Blood. And they even repeated it on the back here. I'm like, is that really necessary? Are people that stupid they don't know what the title of the movie is? You have to put it on there twice? And did you really have to emblazon your logo all over this just because you're releasing it in a 2-pack? What was the other film? Was it Bruiser? Because that's the other one film that I have with the Walmart thing on it is Bruiser. This is definitely the better movie. But yeah, and what I also find pretty funny about this film is that it's called The House That Dripped Blood, but there is not a single drop of blood in the entire film. There's no blood. This film is bloodless. And there's no house that drips blood in it either. So there's no Amityville horror sort of stuff going on where the walls are bleeding. There's nothing like that. So it's kind of false advertising, but then again, it's a good title. It rolls off the tongue, and it actually works. So I'm not really going to complain that much about it. But I just thought it was kind of funny that it's called The House That Dripped Blood, and there's no blood in the film. In fact, it's a movie that was going to get like a PG rating by the British censor board or ratings board, and then the producers, like, I guess, gave some money under the table or something to make it rated X, because they're like, we can't have it be rated PG. We need this to be a harder rating so people actually go to see it. But it didn't work out because it ended up not doing that well in Britain at all, and it actually did better in the US. So I thought that's kind of funny. That's another interesting little bit of trivia. There's a few other bits of trivia I want to mention when I get around to the segments that they would tie into. But yeah, The House That Dripped Blood, and there's no blood. But The House That Dripped Blood is a Amicus horror anthology, and they seem to be the production house for horror anthologies, for British horror anthologies. It's like that's the place to be for those, is Amicus. And hey, you know, if you're really good at one thing, why not keep doing it? And they were really good at making horror anthologies. So this one is directed by Peter Duffell. The direction in this, it's fine. It's not on the level of Freddie Francis or Roy Ward Baker, but it's there. It's fine. It's not anything that's terrible. It's serviceable. I feel if there was a better director, like a more accomplished director like Freddie Francis or something, who actually was the original choice to direct the film, but he was working on some movie in Hollywood at the time, but so that made it so he could not direct the movie. And the reason why he was not able to do it also ended up falling through. So Freddie Francis was not able to do the film because of a movie that never got made. So I find that kind of interesting. So he still ended up doing the movie in the end, but that ultimately, because the project that he was hired for did not end up working out. And originally, the director, Peter Duffell, he wanted the film to be titled The Deaf and the Maiden, or Deaf and the Maiden, because he used Franz Schubert's composition of the same name in the movie as like the main theme. But the producer, Milton Subtosky, he insisted on The House That Dripped Blood, you know, telling him, we're in the marketplace, we have to use that title, because we're in the horror marketplace, you know, we can't be calling it Deaf and the Maiden. You know, he was right. And the rest is history. It's written by Robert Bloch and Russ Jones. Robert Bloch, the reason why I'd say it's written by him is because the segments are based on stories that he wrote, short stories that he wrote for different magazines in the 30s, 60s, and 40s. You know, sort of like the pulp magazines. Like one of them was actually in Weird Tales. Actually, a couple of them were in Weird Tales, and one was in Unknown, and another one was in Fury in the 60s. Russ Jones, I think, was the person who was hired to doctor the short stories and kind of rewrite them to make them fit into the horror anthology format. It also features a score by Michael Dress, and it's there. It's nothing fancy. It's there. I think I think it's Michael Gamely, or I don't know if that's his first name or not, but I know the composer's last name is Gamely, uh, who did the score for Vault of Horror. He might have been a better choice, but still, Michael Dress is there. It's not like the score is terrible or anything like that. Cinematography by Ray Parslow. It's solid. Not spectacular, but it's solid. The editing by Peter Tanner, I thought it was pretty good. And that's some pretty good editing for the most part, especially how they cut the different horror anthology segments and how they were edited into the framework story. And for the most part, I thought the screenplay by Robert Bloch and Russ Jones was good. I thought it was actually really good. This is horror anthologies, when it comes to the quality of them, in order to get them really down and for horror anthology to really click, you got to have good stories. And I felt the stories in this were great picks, and I thought they were really well done for the most part for the low budget. It was like a $500,000 budget. And, that's a decent amount of money in 1971, but still, it's not a lot of money. So despite the low budget, they still managed to churn out some high quality efforts. It didn't really look like a super low budget affair, and in large part it goes to Duffell's direction, where it isn't as good as Freddie Francis, but it's still there. And because he was hired, the production was able to get actors like Lee, Cushing, and Pitt, because actually those were decided by the producers. So I was wrong. The trivia on here is kind of weird in the way it's written. The producers already had Lee, Cushing, and Pitt, but the other actors in the film were cast by Duffell. So Duffell's the reason why you have actors like Joss Ackland, who's in one of the segments, John Pertwee. Originally, John Pertwee was not the original choice to play the role of the actor who buys a cloak and becomes a vampire in the last segment. The original actor in mind was for Vincent Price. But Vincent Price was unable to accept because he had an exclusive contract with AIP for horror films. And that's too bad because he liked the script. And John Pertwee did a fine job, but that segment would have been even better if it had Vincent Price playing the role. The film has a running time of about 102 minutes, and it goes by pretty quick. This is not a boring movie. I thought it was a fairly fast-paced yarn. Even though there isn't any blood in it, it's still a entertaining horror anthology because of the characters and because of the story and how well these stories are written. And the wraparound segment I actually liked quite a bit, especially the twist near the end. I thought it was really clever. The twist is that the house itself is somewhat haunted or has a curse on it, and anyone who goes into the house, they are pretty much what it does is it manifests their desires or the things that they particularly enjoy, or their vices or whatever. And it's one of those things where you would have to be prepared for what it's going to deliver to you. And I thought that was actually pretty clever. And the guy who runs the house, named AJ Stoker, I believe that's his name, he's the housekeeper, and he turns to the camera and says, maybe you might be the next tenant. So I thought that was a nice little wraparound segment framework story, because the framework for all of these stories is that these stories take place in the same house. So the first segment is Method for Murder, and it features a writer of horror stories played by Denholm Elliott, Brody from the Indiana Jones films. And Denholm Elliott was one of the villains in the last segment in Vault of Horror. Here he's the protagonist, and it's nice to see him in a role like this, and it's always nice to see him in something other than Indiana Jones. And you could tell that he had that you could tell that this is a guy who was going to go someplace, because he already had the charisma that he showed as Brody in the Indiana Jones films in this segment. So he is a writer, and he's trying to write this horror stories, and he moves into the house with his wife, Joanna Dunham, and he's haunted by these visions of this strangler that he's created for his novel called Dominic, and he's played by Tom Adams. And there's this sort of back and forth sort of twist that go on where Dominic is it in his head, and then you find out that is it that it might not be, because his wife is trying to scare him away so she can get his money or something. So she has her boyfriend, the guy that she's cheating on her husband with, dress up like the Strangler. And I have to give this segment the look of the Strangler was effectively creepy. It's this guy with this gray wig, and he's got these messed up teeth, and it honestly is a pretty creepy design despite its simplicity. And the twist is that the character actually did come to life, and it really wasn't Dominic, because Dominic, the thought, it's believed at first that it's just the guy that his wife is sleeping with, who is dressed as Dominic. He never really was real, but then you find out it really was real, because he ends up killing the wife and Tom, and he actually killed the guy who masqueraded as him earlier. Denholm Elliott's character, though, he dies earlier due to a heart attack because of the guy who's dressed up as Dominic, who scares him earlier. But then, of course, you find out he's real. Dominic is real. It was a decent first segment. It's not my favorite of the segments in the film, but it's a decent one. It had some creepy imagery, and Denholm Elliott was nice to see him, even though he was only in it for a little bit because he died about halfway through the segment. The second segment is Waxworks. Is one of my favorites. It features Peter Cushing and Joss Ackland. Joss Ackland, I remember, is Anomalous from Bogus Journey, and he was also, I believe he was also in The Mighty Ducks as Hans. And they play Peter Cushing, Joss Ackland. They play two friends, and Peter Cushing's character likes to go to this waxwork museum, and then he sees one day that this waxwork museum has a model of a lady that they recognize, and so they keep going over there, and Peter Cushing is freaked out by the lady, so he doesn't go back, but Joss Ackland, his friend, keeps going back, and then ultimately you find out that the waxwork museum owner, the lady was his girlfriend, and I think that Peter Cushing and Joss Ackland were involved somehow with how she died, and so he ends up getting revenge, and he kills Peter Cushing and puts his head on the platter that the model of his wife is holding, and that's kind of what you have with the poster art. Is the lady with the skull face showing, because there's a scene earlier where they knock the model around and break the face off, and the skull is showing, and that was a pretty eerie image. So that was a pretty good one. The third segment is Sweets to the Sweet, another one that I really enjoyed. This one has a teacher who's hired by Christopher Lee, who is a widower, and he's a very cold and just kind of dark guy. Like, he's the type of guy who you really wouldn't necessarily trust, but you're like, okay, maybe I'll help this guy out, because maybe he's just depressed because he lost his wife. So this teacher, played by Nyree Dawn Porter, who I thought was great in the role here, and Christopher Lee was really wonderful too in the role that he had. He is asking this teacher to teach his young daughter, Chloe Frank, who's played by Chloe Franks. And this young actress, is fantastic. She plays this role to a hilt. It's the role of this just creepy child, and at first I thought maybe she might be a kid who might be the product of the devil or something, or there might be something going on supernatural, and there is something supernatural. She's the daughter of a witch. Her mother was a witch, and it's insinuated that Christopher Lee might have killed her, or she might have died later, some other way, or other people had killed her. And Christopher Lee doesn't want his daughter to have a doll because the dolls could be used for voodoo or for witchcraft. And eventually that's what happens. His daughter actually makes a wax doll that she uses to torture and eventually kill Christopher Lee's character with. And the teacher eventually figures out what's going on with her, and eventually she ends up becoming the next victim of the daughter. And the little girl, Chloe Franks, like I said, she was phenomenal in the role as this creepy little girl. Then the last segment is called The Cloak, and it's my favorite segment. This one is more tongue-in-cheek, but that's part of why I loved it so much. It has a horror film actor named Paul Henderson, who's played by John Pertwee, and he's moving into this house. He moves into the house because he wants to use it as a guest house while he's shooting a vampire film. So there's some nice meta stuff going on here. And he is trying to find a cloak for his vampire outfit because the cloak that was made for him for the production was lame. So he goes and buys a cloak from this shopkeeper at this weird shop that he found an address for. And the shopkeeper is played by Jeffrey Baildon. And he buys this cloak and he uses it as his costume. Well, the cloak actually ends up giving him strange powers and actually makes him a vampire. And he quickly discovers what's going on. Like during the witching hour, the clock strikes 12 and he floats up in the air. Like actually before that, like he actually gets sharp teeth, fangs. He grows fangs and then he floats up into the air. And John Pertwee's reactions to that were pretty cool. Were actually not, I don't know, cool, but they were funny. They were fun. And then the twist is that Ingrid Pitt's character, she actually uses the cloak and then wants the actor to join her, and damn does she look sexy. She looks hot to trot in this outfit, showing like a tons of ample cleavage and but you know, I love looking at Ingrid Pitt, but she cannot act. She's a terrible actress, but hey, you know, she's got nice tits. she's nice to look at. But anyway, she becomes a vampire because she puts the cloak on, and then she eventually turns John Pertwee, and then it's up to this cop, the cop who has been the one who's been investigating what's going on in this house, to go into the house and confront the John Pertwee, and actually shoves a stake into his chest, but then he becomes the victim of Ingrid Pitt's vampiress, or vampira, or something, or vampirella. And then you have the ending scene where the housekeeper is talking to the audience and mentions the twist of what the house is all about. And that's the end of the film. Yeah, I definitely would recommend this one if you're a fan of horror anthologies, especially if you like Tales from the Crypt, the Amicus film. If you're into British horror anthologies or old school films like that, definitely give this one a watch. It's a lot of fun. It's entertaining. All the segments are watchable. There isn't one out of the bunch that is bad or terrible. Like, they were all at least average. Majority of them, though, were above average. I would say it's one of the better horror anthologies that I've seen is The House That Dripped Blood. This DVD has a little interview with the producer that's not much, but hey, it's better than nothing. I would love to see this get like a Blu-ray release from like Arrow or some company like that. I don't know if they did or not. I don't even know. It doesn't even seem like it even has a DVD release. I mean, it does have a DVD release. It has a Blu-ray release. It doesn't have a Blu-ray release. God damn it. What is wrong with me? Forgive me, folks. I'm a bit out of it because I just got over a cold, so I haven't recorded a video in a long time, so that's part of it. But yeah, it has a DVD release because I'm holding it in my hands, but it does not have a Blu-ray release, which I think is a shame. I think a lot of these Amicus horror films should be released on Blu-ray. That would be awesome to have like an Arrow Amicus box set that has like a bunch of Amicus horror anthologies all in one set with new features and new remastered picture and sound. But anyway, until then, I'm okay with the DVD. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The House That Dripped Blood. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. See ya.